The best of the Pac-12, MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down coaches' rankings across the nation. We are looking at all the Power 5 conferences and ranking the top 5 at each positional unit. Also ranking the coaches, which is extra interesting. I got Michelle Gardner on the line from Arizona Republic, also Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. So, folks, I am leaving the lists of each one of our Pac-12 coaches' rankings 1 through 12 down in the description section underneath the video. So please check it out there. You can contrast and compare right there. So this is my thought process. Number one, I'm not big on legacy. And really the only coach that there's an issue with legacy for me is Chip Kelly. Obviously dominant at Oregon, a rough start at UCLA. I think back to like Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno and think if I was ranking them in 2009, I would rank them near the top of the list in terms of all-time rankings. But do I want them coaching my program here and now? Not necessarily. I thought they were marginal coaches maybe at that point in their career. We really don't have an issue with anything like that here, except for Chip Kelly's somewhere in that range where you got to look at, okay, is he the coach at Oregon? He's the coach we've seen the last 2 years at UCLA. The other, obviously, we've got to rank success versus the recruiting base, the facilities, the money involved, the resources, and try to weigh that out in regards to who's got the advantages, as Michelle mentioned, with Clay Helton in particular, where you would expect him to win big versus if Clay Helton was posted the same record at Colorado or Cal, that would be a certainly different dynamic. So here we go. And I guess the third disclaimer would be with a new coach, in the case of Jimmy Lake, I typically kind of rate them neutral. Say, okay, I'm giving them a starting position of being neutral, and everybody who I believe is a capable, decent coach doing a decent job, I rank them ahead of them, and anybody that has not done a good job, I would rank below the person who does a neutral placeholder. That said, I'm kind of bucking my trend because I'm giving some credence to Chip Kelly here. Here we go, from 12 to 1. Jim Lake at Washington, defensive coordinator there under Chris Peterson. And NFL defensive coach as well. Chris Peterson just showers him with accolades in regards to the job he's going to do at Washington, but I got to see him. This is almost a placeholder at the bottom of the stack at number 12. Kevin Sumlin, I've got at number 11. Now, Kevin Sumlin, if this was a decade ago, he had the good run at Houston. His last team was 12-1. He was known as a quarterback guru, great recruiter, goes to Texas A&M, tears it up in recruiting, can never win, though. After the Johnny Manziel year, just a string of 8-5 disappointing teams, and now at Arizona is off to a rough start at 9-15 his first 2 years, so he is trending down, as Michelle in particular pointed out. At number 10, I've got Carl Durrell at Colorado. The record at UCLA is not bad. Isn't this basically what a UCLA coach does, Tony? 35-27, 24-18 in the Pac-12. That sounds like a UCLA coach to me. They should do that. Look, that sounds like a UCLA run to me.
Right. Look, and UCLA would take that record in a heartbeat over the last few years right now. You know, look at the games Durrell got outcoached in, and UCLA fans still aren't going to forgive him for his first ever game, which ironically enough was against Colorado, when he told the media afterwards he didn't know where to stand on the sideline, so he kept getting lost in the shuffle of players. You know, it was a rough 4 years. He's a good guy. He's a nice guy. The staff always liked him. The administrative staff always liked him. But, you know, I also look at, he got no other head coaching offers with dozens of schools opening up every year with new head coaching jobs. He got exactly 0 offers.
What's great about the Pac-12 is I think the disparity in resources isn't what it is in the other conferences. It's closer. Right. But if anybody's got it, it's this guy, Clay Helton at number 9. He should do better. He should win more. Of course, we saw what Pete Carroll did, and I'm not comparing him to an all-time great coach, but the bar is high, and he's generally a bit disappointing. Came in at the end of 2015. They won a Rose Bowl in 2016, finished top 4 in the nation. They turn around, they win the Pac-12 in 2017. He racks up 3 consecutive top 10 recruiting classes, but everything since then has been a downward trajectory. 13-12 on the field, bad recruiting efforts. So he was retained. We'll see if he can turn it around. Clay Helton at number 9. Nick Rolovich at number 8, to Michelle's point, did a nice job at Hawaii. 28-27 with the Rainbows. But let's keep into consideration, I looked at the preceding years under Norm Chow. 11-39 Hawaii was the preceding seasons before. So he goes from 11-39, takes over that program, goes 28-27, including 10-5 this past season. But as Michelle points out again, different deal in the Pac-12. We'll see what he's got at Washington State and replacing Mike Leach. Number 7, Jonathan Smith, Oregon State. I don't want to go the route of hyperbole too much in saying it was a remarkable job what he did, but an outstanding job in his second year there at Oregon State. Beyond the 2-10 record and the awful performances by Oregon State, if you really grind into the metrics, they were historically bad for like 3 or 4 years. Like the offensive and defensive metrics were even worse than the record, and they were respectable last year. He brought them up to 4-5 in the Pac-12, and as you mentioned, Tony, beat Arizona State and Cal, stayed close with Washington State, stayed within 2 touchdowns of the Pac-12 champions in the finale. So Jonathan Smith has a good thing going there with little to work with at Oregon State. I'm not quite as high on Herm Edwards as the two of you. Not quite. I've got him at number 6. His tenure with the Jets and Chiefs, I thought was very clear in he lacked in game management, clock management, but in regards to being a leader of men, there are few that are better. So that's pretty much what we saw in the NFL. He would get teams into the playoffs and wouldn't necessarily perform in the playoffs, but had a decent run in the NFL. Again, I'm not rating him on that, but it's just in my mind, like you, Tony, the CEO experiment seems to be working. Not that he's just racked up the wins, but everything seems to be moving in a positive direction. And he's coming off a nice season with a bowl victory with a tremendous freshman quarterback who may show up in our rankings here coming up when we look at the quarterbacks. Number 5, I've got David Shaw. My knock against David Shaw is I tend to separate guys that built programs versus guys that maintain programs. Jim Harbaugh built Stanford. David Shaw maintained it at a very high level for 4 or 5 years, winning Rose Bowls, finishing top 5 to 10 in the nation. Then there's been this, he's gone from that level to like this 8-4, 9-3 level, which again at Stanford's very good. And now, boom, 4-8 last year. It'll be interesting to see what happens with David Shaw from here on out. Justin Wilcox impresses me. I think he's got little to work with, little support at Cal, difficult place to win, but his teams are playing very well. As you mentioned, Tony comes off a bowl victory. That's just something that's not done on a regular basis at Cal, and winning 8 games last year, and he's one of the better defensive minds in the nation. All right, number 3, here's Chip Kelly. And man, I wrestle with this because the 2 seasons at UCLA have been very disappointing for me. And Tony just doesn't want to hear it, I guess. No.
No, sorry.
33-3 in the Pac-12, though, at Oregon. I just can't dismiss. What I'm trying to figure out is if all that innovation and being ahead of the curve and setting the trends, if that's kind of passed him by and he's just one of the pack now, pardon the pun, and he's just another football coach as opposed to being an innovator and off to a rough start at UCLA. Number 2, Mario Cristobal, for all the good things that you guys have mentioned. He may have the best program in the Pac-12 right now. They're recruiting the best. They've won the Rose Bowl in the Pac-12 championship. So Mario Cristobal's got it rolling at Oregon. But again, it's just been the one season. And finally, I agree with both of you. Kyle Whittingham, considering that he at Utah, if you go back to 2008, wins a Sugar Bowl, finishes undefeated as a group of 5 or whatever we were calling those conferences at the time, beating an Alabama in a Sugar Bowl. Then he makes the transition to the Pac-12, big boy football. His program takes a few years to adjust, but he does make the adjustments, and now he's winning at a high level there in the Pac-12, 2 consecutive division championships, and his teams are always up, hard-nosed, disciplined, play the game the right way, and fundamentally sound. And Kyle Whittingham, I've got it number 1 as well.
It's really hard with 3 new coaches, so you kind of have to weigh in the coach and the program that they're at. So I kind of take those things into consideration when we're talking about that. Well, at the bottom, I hate to say it, at the bottom, I'm going to go Kevin Sumlin at Arizona. I think, you look at him this year, I think he's one of the several coaches in this conference on the hot seat. Also, rumor has it he doesn't like to recruit, and I don't know how you can not like to recruit and be a college football coach, but certainly it's a team that's underachieved, and I'd put him at number 12. Number 11, I'm going to go Karl Dorrell. Obviously, Karl Dorrell was at UCLA. That experiment didn't go well. He's also coming in with no spring practice, and I can't imagine being a new coach, no spring practice, and losing all your key position players. So I think it could be a rough ride for Karl this year and the Colorado Buffaloes. Number 10, I am going to go with Nick Rolovich from Washington State, only because we just don't have a really balance of what he's done. He did pretty well at Hawaii, but dealing with that conference and dealing with the Pac-12 is a completely different animal. So it remains to be seen. So we're going to put him there, give him a chance to work his way up as we go. Number 9, I'm going to go Chip Kelly, another massive underachiever. And everybody thought that he was going to be a great hire at UCLA. I think he's really on the hot seat. They're not filling the Rose Bowl. UCLA should never be bad, just like USC should never be bad with what they have to draw from. So I think Chip Kelly's on the hot seat, and I think he's underachieved, so I'm leaving him at number 9. 8, I'm going to go Clay Helton. A lot of the same issues. Massive underachiever. USC should be good year in and year out with the tradition they have. Most of us are surprised he lasted this long, so we're going to go Clay Helton at 8. 7, I'm going to go Jonathan Smith at Oregon State. I actually think he did a pretty good job there last year, and if they'd have won one more, maybe 2 more games, I might have voted him for Coach of the Year. So I think he's done a good job. He has a lot of things working against him. It's Oregon State. He doesn't have the pay pool for his assistant coaches. A lot of schools have. So he doesn't have a lot of things to work with that some of the other schools have, but I think he's done a pretty good job. 6, I'm going to go Jimmy Lake at Washington. Again, we just don't know a whole lot about him. He's been in the program. I think that gives Washington State a head up on a lot of teams that hire from outside of the school. He was the defensive coordinator. I did watch his press conference when he was hired. I liked what he had to say. So we're going to leave him there for now. 5, I've got to go Herm Edwards. I love Herm. I get to deal with Herm on a daily basis. I'm blessed. So the only reason I don't have Herm higher is because they did lose a couple of games they should have won. They should never have lost to Colorado. Inexcusable loss. Probably should have lost to UCLA either. But then on the other side, he beats Oregon. He had a great road win at Michigan State. So they've won some games they weren't supposed to win, and they lost games they weren't supposed to lose. So I like what Herm is doing, and if they can get a little bit more consistency, I think that this team could be a program that people are going to have to look out for. 4, I'm going with David Shaw from Stanford. Last year, obviously, was an awful year for the Cardinals. He just had massive injuries, quarterback injuries, but I've heard a lot of people say they're surprised he's not in the pro ranks by now. So I like David Shaw. I like what he's done, so we'll leave him there. 3, I'm going to go Justin Wilcox from Cal, another coach. I think he's now going to be in his 4th year. He's brought that program a long way. He's done a lot with little. Again, it's a school that doesn't have the resources and facilities a lot of schools have, but I like what he's done too. So number 2, I'm going to go Mario Cristobal at Oregon. It seems like year in and year out, they're the team to beat. They've got the facilities. He seems to be a great recruiter. I'm going to leave him there, and obviously that means the number 1 would be Utah at Kyle Whittingham. And obviously, I think we're going to see a lot about what he can do this year because Utah has a ton of losses, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So when you look at what Utah lost, I think we're really going to see what he can do coaching-wise this year because he's lost a lot of his defense.
Yeah, I'm going to run quickly through the bottom part of it because I don't have a lot of disagreement with Michelle. Just a spot here or there. I'm putting Karl Dorrell at the bottom of the list based on his epic failure in his term at UCLA, the fact that he was never offered another head coaching job after that until this, and Colorado was put in a tough situation when Mel Tucker left. with really no notice to go to Michigan State. Darrell's a good position good position coach, but way over his head in terms of head coach. Then I'm going to go Sumlin. I'm going to go Lake after that. Then I'm going to go Chip Kelly. I've got him down pretty low. 2 years of dramatic underachieving. I'm putting Rolovich ahead of Kelly based on Rolovich's time at Hawaii. I think he got a lot out of very little there. Then I'm going to go Clay Helton at USC, and then Smith at Oregon State. So that puts us in the number 5 through 1 spots. I'm going to go with Justin Wilcox at Cal, number 5. Been there 3 years and is only 20-18 overall in those 3 years. So it's a bit of a rebuild job at Cal, but definitely on the upswing. They went 8-5 overall last year, including wins at Washington and at Ole Miss on the road, and had a win over Illinois in the Red Box Bowl. So I'm going to go Justin Wilcox, number 5. Number 4, I'm going to go Herm Edwards, and I'm going to own up to it. I've done this with you before, Mark. When Herm Edwards was hired, I was scratching my head saying, what in goodness name is that all about? And I think matter of fact, you and I did a live show.
Me too.
You and I did a live show after his first Pac-12 media day. And it was one of the most esoteric events I'd ever been to because he barely talked about football. Look, Herm Edwards can coach. He can coach at the high level in college. And in talking to his players, as I have, not as much as Michelle, of course, they buy into what he's pitching. And so I think, he had a very experienced team his first year, and then lost Manny Wilkins and lost N'Keal Harry and so on and so forth. He had a much younger team this year, but give him a couple more years and even another year or two, and he's going to be competing for the Pac-12 South Championship routinely. I like Herm. I'm putting Mario Cristobal at number 3. And really only because, look, he had a good year, but he also had Justin Herbert at quarterback, and he had the most experienced offensive line in the entire country and one of the 2 best offensive lines in the entire country. Let me see what you can do building for a year or 2, and then I'm willing to move you up. Great Rose Bowl win, though, over Wisconsin. 21-7 overall in his 2 years, so definitely on the right track. I'm putting David Shaw at number 2. I like David Shaw. You and I have talked about this, Mark. I think the guy is super smart, but 3 years now without winning a Pac-12 title and on a downward trajectory in terms of his record. I'm keeping him at number 2 because there's got to be some credit for the guy beating Pop Warner as the all-time leading coach at Stanford in terms of wins. Just beating Pop Warner last year gets you some kind of props. And then lastly, Kyle Winningham. And I agree with what we were talking about before. He's been there 16 years, 9 of them in the Pac-12. He's got back-to-back bowl losses, but he does have back-to-back Pac-12 South titles. And, look, I also completely agree. He lost a lot on offense and defense. He loses Zach Moss. He loses Tyler Huntley. He loses Bradley and Nye on the defensive end and Jalen Johnson. So let's see what he can do. But right now, as we sit here today, I think he's the top coach in the conference.